Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Mike and today I'm going to do my promised top 10 classic horror books. I've read quite a bit in classic horror and these are, in my opinion, the best. So let's get into it. Okay, the first book, number 10, is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. Now, H.G. Wells is the classic father of science fiction. All his early books are science fiction, of course, but his books also are his early books are also kind of horror-like. I mean, they all, like The War of the Worlds had blood-drinking Martians, and The Time Machine had the Morlocks, which are really kind of ghastly creatures who live underground and eat people. So, but the Island of Dr. Moreau is different. It's special in its own unique way. The story of Dr. Moreau, who on his island performs ghastly experiments on animals and turns them into something else. It's a great book, and it's a book, I think, more than anything else about alienation. The poor guy who's stuck on this island, by the time he gets off this island, he can't really relate to anybody. It's about a lot of things. It's about cruelty to animals, to people, but really, I think more than anything else, this book is about isolation and it's alienation, I should say, and it's a great book. Read this book, well worth your time. Okay, what are we at? Number 9, Sheridan Le Fanu. This book is the Oxford World's Classics edition of Green Tea and Other Weird Stories. He did a book called In a Glass Darkly, which had all of his best stories in it. Had Carmilla, the famous vampire story that at least partially influenced Dracula, influenced Bram Stoker. So it influenced Dracula in a wee little way, at least. This book has this story, and it has all the stories that were in A Glass Darkly, plus some other stories. So it's kind of Sheridan Le Fanu's greatest hits, really classic ghost story writer, and well worth reading. And his stories hold up pretty well even today. So definitely worth checking out. Creepy stuff. Good stuff here. So number 8. We're at 10, 9. Yeah, number 8. I'm not very good at math. Can't count. So here we go. Algernon Blackwood. This is Ancient Sorceries and Other Weird Stories. This actually has an odd misprint here. Inside, on the title page, it's Ancient Sorceries and Other Weird Tales. Where on the cover it's Ancient Sorceries and Other Weird Stories. Strange misprint, and even stranger still is that they reprinted this volume. They had a new edition of it, and it had the same weird mistake. Weird. But yeah, it's great. It has the Wendigo in it, which is a great creepy hunting story. It has the Willows, which H.P. Lovecraft said was the greatest weird story of all time. It was certainly his favorite weird story. I don't know if it's the best of all time, but it's really good. It's up there. The Willows, that's a creepy story. A lot of his best stuff is in this Penguin volume. So definitely pick this up and check this out. Algernon Blackwood. More people should be reading him today. Okay, next up, Arthur Macon. Arthur Macon? I think it's Macon. This is The Great God Pan and Other Horror Stories. This is another Oxford edition. this is probably the one volume Macon to get. Penguin came out with an Arthur Macon, but inexplicably, it didn't have the great god Pan in it, which is his best story. That boggles my mind. Why would you, I mean, that's the story that everybody talks about from Macon, and if you haven't read it, that's the story you want to read. So it's strange to me that they did that. Odd. So this is definitely the winner as far as one volume Arthur Macons are concerned, and also because this has the complete novel of the Three Impostors. Often the Three Impostors is you'll see it kind of cut up and little bits of it put in anthologies, but this has the whole thing. And Arthur Macon wasn't just creepy; he was gross sometimes, and just like he just went for it when it came to the horror. Very influential guy, underrated writer, I think. I don't hear too many people talking about him anymore, and that's a shame. He wrote good stuff, and definitely this is the volume to get. Also, in The Great God Pan, the villainess, her name was Vaughn, and I like to pretend that we're related in some unnatural way. All right, so that's that. So now we are up to M.R. James. This is another Oxford World's Classics. They make some great books, these guys. This is M.R. James' Collected Ghost Stories. James did some great ghost stories, and his ghosts, I mean, they weren't just the sheeted. Well, he did have sheeted ghosts, and it was creepy as hell. But he did a lot of. I mean, his ghosts were dangerous and strange and grotesque, and he's M.R. James. He's really he was a really influential author. You'll see his influence on things even today, and every time I read him, I admire him more. He has grown in my estimation over the years. Awesome stuff. Pick up some M.R. James. All right, so now I just read this for the first time last year. I don't know why I waited so long to read this book, because it is fantastic. It is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And creepy Dorian, I love him. He's just, he just parties all the time. He's completely immoral. And he, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the story because everybody is. He's got the magic picture hidden away that ages as he stays young. And not only ages, but all his immorality and dissipation, all the marks of that, which would show up on your face, don't. They show up on the picture. And so he stays young and beautiful while his picture becomes terrible and creepy. And he just lives a life of amorality. And if anyone knows about that, I guess it would be Oscar Wilde, excuse me. Great book. I can't say enough about how wonderful this is and how you should read it. So what are we up to now? Edgar Allan Poe. Now, he wrote a lot more than just horror. I do have the complete Edgar Allan Poe up here on my bookshelf, but that's not what I would recommend. If you're interested in just his horror stories, I would get one of these smaller volumes. This is the Bantam Classic, The Telltale Heart and Other Writings. You can get the Signet. This is The Fall of the House of Usher and Other Tales. Penguin has a version of it. Oxford does. Barnes & Noble does. Everybody does. And the contents are all going to be very similar, if not the same, in all of those. So, yeah, pick up one of these. You'll get all his major stories, all his really horror stories. You'll see why he's such a big deal. He was the king of horror. Super important writer. He probably should be higher on this list, but these other books I like better, so yeah. But really, he probably should be higher. But how do you get higher than Frankenstein? Frankenstein. Everybody knows Frankenstein. At least they think they know Frankenstein. But you really don't know Frankenstein unless you've read the book. There's a million movies. Some of them were good movies, but none of them were as good as this. And this is actually the version to get. This is the version that is illustrated by Bernie Wrightson, and it is beautiful. I mean, look at that. Look at that monster. I mean, this book is full of beautiful Bernie Wrightson illustrations. So if you can find it, definitely get this version. But even if you don't, read the book. This book is actually pretty deep. It's about a lot of things. It's not just a creepy horror story, although it is that. It's pretty deep in that it's about a lot of things. It's, you know, of course it's about transgressing and going too far in the name of science. But it's also about cruelty. It's about our responsibilities to our fellow man. It's about a lot of things. And the monster, who you might think from the movies is just a big doofus, he's really, really intelligent, sensitive creature. And even though he does terrible things, and he does terrible things, you can really sympathize with him. And you can kind of see why he does terrible things, even though they're terrible. I mean, he straight up murders people, and, you know, that's just wrong. But definitely such a great book. Another book that every time I read it, I like it more. It's a little book, but I always find something new in it whenever I go back to it. So definitely Frankenstein. And of course, Dracula. What can you say? Dracula's the best. I love Dracula. They've made, of course, a billion movies about Dracula. Some of them, again, good movies. For some reason, they've never really done. I mean, even Bram Stoker's Dracula was not Bram Stoker's Dracula. I can't figure that out. I can't figure out why they don't make a version of Dracula that sticks to this story. Because if you've only seen the movies, it's really worth your time. Read the book. Read the book. The story in the book is better. It really holds up. It holds up after all of this time as being a genuinely scary story. And even when it's not scary, it's compelling. It's not perfect. We get a little too much Van Helsing. I mean, Van Helsing, stop talking, man. Just stop. But despite an overabundance of Van Helsing, I wish there was a little bit more Dracula in Dracula, although really, there's probably enough Dracula in Dracula. It's probably just enough Dracula in this book. And I have a soft spot for this copy. Look how beautiful this is. Look at that. This is the first book I ever read, was Dracula. I read it as a small child, went way over my head, but I loved it. I love this copy because it is the first version of Dracula that I ever read. I've got a bunch of versions of Dracula for some reason, but this is still, after all this time, my favorite. Love it. So what the hell can top Dracula? What could be number one? Well, you know what number one is. I'll pull it off my shelf here. Lovecraft. Lovecraft is the man. He's the best. I mean, super, super creepy, horrifying H.P. Lovecraft. He wrote some of the most original horror stories ever. They weren't just horror, they were also fantasy and science fiction. They were a lot of things, and there are a lot of different versions to get. This is the annotated version of H.P. Lovecraft, which I like an awful lot. It is, it's beautiful, this version. It's got so much coolness in it. Of course, now when I'm flipping through it, I can't find any of the coolness, but yeah, it's got a bunch of illustrations. It's pretty heavily annotated. So this is a great version to get, but it is giant. Probably a good one volume. I think probably the best one volume H.P. Lovecraft to get is probably the Library of America version. What is it, Pumpsy? I'm trying to talk here, my dog. The Library of America version has all the major stories in it. It doesn't have all of them. It doesn't have everything. It's missing a couple of good ones. It's missing the Hound, I think. I think it's missing the Hound, which is a shame because that was good. But it has most of the major stuff. And if you read all of H.P. Lovecraft stories at once, which is how I'd recommend it, you know, they're different stories, but they're all connected. They all reference each other. And by the time you read them all, you know, he's given you this horrifying, ghastly world of horror, and it's just amazing stuff. You know, he's controversial now because he was a total racist. He was, and unfortunately, you know, at the time he was writing in the 20s and early 30s, and unfortunately, a lot of people back then were pretty racist, and he was pretty racist. He grew up in a racist household, and he just never got over it, which is a shame. And in a way, his xenophobia kind of helped out his writing in a way, because he was scared of everybody. He was scared of everything. And he kind of transformed all his fears into like gods and monsters and sea creatures and things. So we might be able to fault the author, but we cannot fault his work, at least not that much. It's great stuff, and has my highest recommendation. Check out H.P. Lovecraft. Ghastly, creepy, wonderful stuff. So yeah, that was my top 10. I hope you liked it. And to everybody who watched my first video, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope you like this one. What have we been at? We're almost at 17 minutes. Well, thank you for taking this time and hanging out with me. Another video soon, I hope. Okay, take care, guys.